Member for Thornley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Great Noongar Nation and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. I pay my deep respect to all elders, past and present. I particularly acknowledge any Aboriginal people who may be watching and listening or may read this speech in the future. This inaugural speech is a multi-dimensional experience. I have now viewed this chamber from 3 different angles. As a political reporter, up there on the press bench above us, as a ministerial advisor to the Attorney-General, who's in the back of the chamber, down there in the bowels of the building, and now as a member of the Legislative Assembly, thanks to the people of Thornley, Gosnells, Maddington, Martin and Orange Grove, who entrusted me with their votes. My election on March 8 was a collective vote of confidence and trust in Roger Cook and his team, and the 8 years of stable and effective government by WA Labor. I'm proud to have been a small cog in that wheel for 6 of those 8 years as Chief of Staff, and I'm humbled to have been chosen to represent the party in Thornley, the Labor heartland, when the vacancy arose. My experience, my career in both journalism and government, and my commitment to justice and equality are the building blocks for the next 4 years of advocating for the people of my electorate. Mr Speaker, to understand why I'm here and what drives me to advocate for Thornley, I need to explain where I've been. I was born in Armidale and grew up in working-class Roleystone, the youngest of 7 children of parents who had recently emigrated from England and Ireland. My father was partially blinded in an explosive accident at work, and for a time there was not enough money for food. The policies of the Whitlam Labor government enabled my mother to attend a night school and graduate from Teachers Training College. She started her first job, and it was teaching at Sacred Heart Primary School in Tonbridge Way, Thornley. She taught at that school until she retired 22 years later. My mother's opportunity for education provided by a Labor government changed our lives, as did her teaching career in the suburb of Thornley. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I didn't take my first opportunity at education. I dropped out of high school at 15 and went north, working on fishing trawlers and as a barmaid in Carnarvon, Port Hedland and Darwin. It was a period that defined me and that has stayed with me until this day. It was during these teenage years that I lived what you'd say on the margins of society, a life that would probably not be a common experience for a lot of us here. I gained insights into the social justice issues that have driven my journalism, much of my work in the Attorney-General's office and my presence here today. Between the ages of 15 and 19, I learned a lot about home insecurity, dysfunctional relationships, sexual harassment and worse, risk for the mill for any young woman in that life at that time. Aged 16 or 17, floating many nautical miles off the coast of Carnarvon, the only female sharing sleeping bunks on a prawn trawler with some interesting deckhands, well, let's say it's not easy to forget. After a particularly scary trip, which involved wielding a kitchen knife, I vowed to remain on dry land. I worked behind the bar at the Sandhurst Tavern in Carnarvon, which was a way out of town and whose clientele was mainly the Aboriginal community. While things sometimes got a bit wild, the majority of my customers were respectful and often sweet and funny. I much preferred it there to the trawler. Working at the Sandhurst and in similar bars in Port Hedland and in Darwin, I got a taste of what it was like for Aboriginal people in the 1980s up north. During this time, I witnessed firsthand the uneven playing field by which these locals were forced to live their lives and how both past and present injustices severely impacted their ability to move forward for a quality life for them and their children. This deeply affected me and has been a formative experience I've taken with me over decades. I took the job at the Sandhurst in Carnarvon because at the time it included accommodation and I needed it. So, like so many West Australians these days, including in my electorate, I did not have secure housing in those years. At times, I stayed in bad relationships to stay in a house. At others, I was forced to leave because I couldn't sleep with one eye open all the time. Too many women and children still live this way in Thornley and around the state, and there are often complex reasons why they find it hard to leave. Sorry. Carnarvon was then known for, amongst other things, heroin addiction. Fishermen would earn big in the season and then head over to the Golden Triangle in Asia for the rest of the year. I had some friends who were addicts, and some were kind-hearted, sensitive, and they were mentally escaping some traumas of the past. Substance abuse, too, can be more complex than it appears on the surface. A stroke of luck, or perhaps divine intervention, visited me at the age of 19. In a dead-end relationship, by that time having very little belief in myself, I got the luckiest break of my life. I had a motor vehicle accident that left me with serious leg injuries. That was my luck. Stranded in Port Hedland, facing many months on crutches, I was unable to work in a bar, I was unable to hitchhike, and I had to go home. And so I went back to school. At age 19, I went to Canning College in Bentley and then studied journalism at Curtin University. My life-changing education was also made possible by a Labor policy providing university study for students who could not pay up front. I believe in second chances, particularly for people living on the margins, and third chances, and fourth. I got lucky, disguised as an accident, but I also had the ability to make the most of that luck. English as a first language, white skin, a supportive mother, and a natural ability to communicate, which enabled me to use my experiences for a greater purpose, first in journalism, then as a staffer in the Labor government, and now here in Parliament. Over 25 years of journalism, I learned a lot about standing in someone else's shoes, a lot about how there are two sides to a story until you listen to the third side, the fourth side, and the fifth side. I sat in people's homes, I heard their tales of tragedies, struggles, perseverance, and I tried to give voice to the voiceless. I drew on some of my experiences on the margins, and I often thought of how things could have been so different for me if I hadn't got lucky, if I hadn't got my second chance. In 1998, I began work on what would become the defining story of my career and my life, that of a man named Andrew Mallard, who was sentenced to life in prison for a murder he didn't commit. Andrew was convicted after police claimed he had confessed to a brutal murder in Mosman Park jewellery store in 1994. Reading through transcripts from Andrew's trial and watching his so-called confession on video, a burning sense of injustice began. That a mentally ill, homeless, hapless young man was interviewed without a lawyer, tried without a competent defence, and jailed for life. The further I looked into the case, the more I could see what was happening, a marginalised person in the control of powerful players protected by their place in the system. Andrew was deemed guilty long before he reached a courtroom, and he did not have the ability and resources to hold them to account. This sense of injustice became all-consuming for me. I knew an innocent man was sitting in Casuarina prison, and the system refused to accept that the case put before the jury did not contain the whole truth. For 8 years we fought to prove that they'd got it wrong. There was a strong resistance to change, and the establishment did not want to admit that they jailed an innocent man. I found out many years later that I was originally approached about this case because Andrew's first appeal lawyer, Mark Ritter, who'd attended Kelmscott High School, knew where I'd grown up. He said, the fact that she too came from the wrong side of the tracks, she might have the sort of scepticism in the authorities to look into it. His Honour Ritter, now a District Court judge, told a podcast in 2018. To the people of Thornley, sometimes you may feel powerless in the system and that no one within the establishment is looking out for you. I promise that as my constituents, I might not be able to fix every problem, but I'll be fighting in your corner. Andrew served 12 years before his conviction was overturned by the High Court and he was released. Very soon after, it was discovered that a British man named Simon Rochford actually committed the crime. The whole time Andrew was in jail, the whole time we'd been fighting to convince authorities to listen to the facts, there had been forensic evidence sitting in storage that could have proved Andrew's innocence. A palm print lifted from the glass of a jewellery cabinet from the day of the Mosman Park murder in 1994 and preserved for the whole 12 years Andrew needlessly spent in jail was fed into a fingerprint database in 2006 and instantly matched the real killer. Andrew, vulnerable, living on the margins, was a victim of a system that would not admit its faults. Sadly, despite a large compensation payment, Andrew did not live to see a happy ending. Having never recovered from the trauma of maximum security prison, being treated like a murderer locked in a cage, he died in an accident in the US in 2019. I pay tribute today to Andrew, to his beautiful mum, Grace, rest in peace, and his incredible sister, Jackie, who remains a friend today. You would all know that a former member of this chamber, Labor MP John Quigley, joined the fight for Andrew in 2002 and was pivotal in his eventual release and exoneration. At the time, I was sitting up there in the press bench, a political reporter for The Australian, and looking down here on the government benches, where I'm now standing, where he was standing. John immediately saw what I saw and felt the same sense of outrage and injustice. His passion, his razor-sharp forensic brain were crucial to the outcome. John's inspiring advocacy for Andrew when he didn't have much else as a government backbencher showed me what can be achieved by a local MP. It was our work on Andrew's case that brought me into the McGowan Labor government in 2017 and which also has led me here to this seat in this chamber. And 6 years as Chief of Staff to the Attorney-General Quigley showed me what can be achieved by a reforming minister in a Labor government. In this place, I'm proud to say I was a part of the Quigley team that brought true reforms, such as lifting the statute of limitations for child sexual abuse survivors, ending imprisonment for unpaid fines, mandating calls to the Aboriginal Legal Service for Indigenous people taken into police custody, and finally bringing Western Australia into a modern and humane system of dealing with mentally impaired people in the criminal justice system. I saw from the inside how policy is made, how laws are drafted, how the lives of people and communities can be changed by the levers of power being pulled in the right direction. From the outside as a journalist, I'd had no idea how many dedicated and talented people spent so many thousands of hours to bring legislation into existence. Meaningful policy choices, technical legal advice, exact usage of words by Parliamentary Council's drafters. When we got into government in 2017, victims of historical sexual abuse had been campaigning for years for the statute of limitations in civil cases to be lifted. Their hopes had been raised by a private member's bill by a Liberal MP, only to have his own government refuse to support it. Almost immediately on coming into office, pressure came from outside. Where was this reform? Where was this bill? I understood why. I would have been writing those stories too, outraged that we hadn't yet delivered. After all, lifting the statute was just a few words in a bill, right? But we did take longer. And as a result, the Quigley Bill produced nation-leading laws that provided a pathway to successfully sue the churches, which resulted in million-dollar payouts, and the provisions were copied in other jurisdictions. Also in 2017, when we came into office, we found that former Attorney-General Michael Mission and former Police Minister Lisa Harvey had rejected an offer for federal funding to establish a custody notification service. This service is a critical safeguard against miscarriages of justice, like Andrew Mallard suffered. We established the CNS, and now every Aboriginal person taken into police custody is entitled to a call to the ALS, saving lives and ensuring early legal advice for vulnerable people for whom English is often a second, third or fourth language. The ALS told me recently about cases including an 8-year-old a 9-year-old, and a number of different domestic violence victims who ended up in police stations, far-flung. There were phone calls, there was advice given, and they were released. There's not been a death in police custody since the CNS was established. As I look up to this press bench from down here, I still believe in the importance of journalism in our democracy. Journos cop a lot of flack, but the job has been made much, much more difficult, and they have less and less resources. The business model was smashed by the loss of advertising to digital media. It meant that we couldn't afford any longer to properly staff newsrooms. Investigative journalists who were able to range free and chase stories, leads down rabbit holes, just no longer had that luxury. At the same time, the voracious appetites, 24/7 news, forced us to file quicker, be faster, less considered, to only get 1 or 2 sides of the story instead of 4 or 5 or 6. It stole time to think, to ponder, to examine and to investigate. And with the challenges of that, the working media landscape dramatically reduced in diversity, of ownership and diminishing independence. I know there are good people with true intentions who remain in the media, and I wish you the best in navigating such difficult terrains. To my friends in the media, the storytellers, the beat reporters, the producers and presenters and researchers, the photographers and soundos, doco makers, columnists, subs and artists, I hope you can keep giving a voice to the voiceless. Great journalism matters, perhaps more than it's ever done. Strive for it where you can, and on those occasions, may the wind be at your backs. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I close and give thanks to my supporters and loved ones, I'll give some more context for the things I've said today about my teenage years on the margins. As rough as those times were, I didn't have to deal with social media. The pervasive nature of it, the 24/7 pressures of it. May I have some more time?
Extension granted.
Thank you. The judgment and stress and public nature of it. Sometimes I wonder if I was safer on a prawn trawler at 16 than kids today in their own bedrooms hooked up online. Anxiety, depression, bullying, predatory behaviour, often leading to school refusal and school exclusion. These are the issues that kids need help with today. In my electorate of Thornley, this is what the principals are dealing with in high numbers. It's hard for governments to keep up with the exponential growth of need for adolescent mental health and related services. It's hard, but we need to keep trying. As a single mum of 2 amazing young adults, I know there are parents, teenagers and young people in my electorate who are struggling. My focus in Thornley is on the schools, the sporting clubs, the parents, the kids and teachers, making sure they have the resources and support and the understanding that they need. That's why I focused election commitments on schools, sporting clubs, including Little Athletics, footy, soccer, the community supports and the men's shed, the women's refuge, the legal centre. I can empathise with kids and teens who feel they have no future, but I believe they can have a second chance, a third or a fourth. I'm looking forward to working with the Thornley Senior High School to deliver a $5 million election commitment to build a new administration and student support building. I'm looking forward to working with the principal of Yulebrook College in Maddington, where they're delivering the big picture program that tailors education to the interest of students who are at risk of leaving school, in the hope of keeping them there and finding their niche in the workplace. It's a program that's also run at Thornley High to great success. To me, justice is not just about flaws and errors in the justice system. Justice is about fairness, equality, opportunity, quality of life. Justice is about schools and clubs in Thornley getting the same opportunities and resources as kids in other areas. It's about the people of Maddington having a town centre that they can be proud of instead of a council depot next to the train station. It's about ensuring people of all nationalities and cultures get the opportunity to thrive and flourish. And it's about the elderly being cared for, the neighbourhoods being safe. As the member for Thornley, I will always be in the corner of my constituents, listening to their stories and fighting for them. And now to thank yous. Thanks to the branch members in Thornley and to the amazing volunteers who came to support me in the campaign. I'll be eternally grateful for the generosity and kindness that you showed me. A particular shout out, I know I can't name everyone, but John, Brendan, Scott, Christine, Tony and Jen, thank you for being on pre-poll. Thanks to my many friends who pulled on a t-shirt or offered moral support or a glass of wine on the odd occasion. Thanks to my great friend Nick Gooder, to my supportive tarts, to the former staff at the AG's office and the amazing team at Artemis Media. Thank you to the Labor Party, which has welcomed me since the day that I started in the Attorney General's office. In Do My House, I worked alongside many good, great, passionate people who were pulling together when a Labor government needed to do good things for WA. Today, many of them, my former colleagues, chiefs of staff, policy advisors, politicians, have become my close friends and whose dedication to Labor values convinced me in 2020 to become a true believer and join the party that I'm now proud to represent here today. Thank you to the many ministers and members from across the party who encouraged me to run and offered help during the campaign. Thanks to Amber, Mark, Simone and Carolyn for deciding to put your faith in me, and thanks to the Premier for welcoming me to your team. A few words about the Premier, if I may. A big factor when I decided to enter the campaign was that in my 6 years of working in executive government, I got to know Roger Cook. I worked alongside him and his staff during COVID and beyond. Politics can be a bit of an illusion, but Roger is what you see is what you get. He's cool and collected, he's calm and clever, but more importantly to me, he is kind, he's principled, and he cares very deeply about people, and I'm very proud to serve on his team. One of the things I love about the Labor Party is the talented, intelligent, absolutely impressive young people who are attracted to the party and want to dedicate themselves to the cause. And there are no better examples than the young women who ran my campaign with whip-smart intellect, compassion and faultless judgment. Led by the amazing Harriet Brooke, thanks also to Sue, Claire, Molly and Karma. Thanks to my electorate staff, Marina, Paul, Nicole, Yvonne and soon Karen. Thanks to my family, Kelly, Ryan, Veronica, Raz, nephew and nieces, and my best friend Kat and her gorgeous girls. Thanks to my mother, who is up there, who has enabled me to continue my career and pay my mortgage while she helped to raise the children. The beautiful byproduct of that is there is a deep and tender relationship with both of my kids have with their nan, and they look after each other to this day. To Evelyn and Josie, you are the lights and loves of my life. Thank you for patiently putting up with my obsessions, my distractions, and while other mothers were telling their kids to put down the devices, I was often checking emails, taking calls, and they were saying, putting down the phone, Mum. I always said I was never going to have children, just like I was never going to go into politics. Having my children has been the best, most important, most rewarding thing I've ever done and will ever do. I'm so proud of the thoughtful, kind, ethical adults you have become. A final thank you to the people of Gosnells, Thornley, Maddington, Martin and Orange Grove. On the polling booths, I was overwhelmed by the many people who shook my hand, wished me well and gave me winks and nods and told me how much they wanted WA Labor to keep on delivering for the community. Representing this electorate feels like coming home, and it's a wonderful opportunity to give back to an area where I grew up and that relies on good public policy and services. I'm incredibly humbled by those trust and support, and I feel inspired to fight for Thornley every day. I hope I can do you all proud and always act in the best interests of democracy, particularly for those who need a voice in the halls of power. Thank you.